They built cities that touched the clouds. And then, they vanished. Empires so powerful. Their names were written across entire continents. At their peak, one ruler could command millions with a single word. Their armies moved like floods, swallowing every kingdom in their path. They didn't just conquer lands. They collected the knowledge of every civilization they touched. Their merchants sailed seas no one dared cross, bringing back riches the world had never seen. Their throne rooms were built to make every visitor feel impossibly small. But even the mightiest empires carry the seeds of their own collapse. When the walls finally broke, centuries of greatness collapsed in a single night. Only a few survived to remember what had once been the greatest civilization on Earth. All that remained was a single stone and words no living soul could read. Centuries later, someone knelt in the sand and began asking questions. Somewhere, in dusty rooms filled with forgotten books, the truth was waiting to be found. And then a hidden chamber opened, untouched for 3,000 years. The walls told a story of a people so alive, so magnificent, it was almost impossible to believe they were gone. These were not just kings and warriors. These were real people who laughed, who loved, who dreamed. At their peak, their markets overflowed with the treasures of the entire known world. They looked up at the same stars we see tonight, and mapped every single one, thousands of years before us. Without machines, without modern tools, they moved mountains and made water flow uphill. They built schools, libraries, academies, because they believed knowledge was the greatest empire of all. They collected not just gold and land, but every living thing that grew beneath foreign skies. But behind the golden walls, powerful men were already arguing over who deserved to rule. In the shadows of the palace, whispers of betrayal moved faster than any army. The throne that once commanded millions was abandoned in a single terrifying night. Millions who had known only greatness suddenly had nothing, nowhere to go, and no one to lead them. The invaders didn't just take the land. They tried to erase every trace that the civilization had ever existed. When the great library burned, thousands of years of human knowledge turned to ash in a single night. One old man stood in the street, holding the last surviving words of 1,000 years of wisdom. A small group of survivors hid what they could, deep in the earth, praying that someday, someone would find it. Where millions had once lived, only darkness remained, and the faint glow of those who refused to give up. Life continued, in small, quiet ways, among people who still carried the old empire in their bones. The books were burned, the temples were taken, but the stories survive, passed from mouth to ear, generation to generation. A child who never knew the empire ran their fingers across its walls and felt something stir deep inside. Traders carried the stories across oceans, and suddenly the whole world was whispering the name of a civilization they had never seen. Even foreign kings became obsessed, desperate to find what remained of the greatest empire ever built. And so they set off into the burning desert, chasing a ghost that had been buried for centuries. The desert pushed back hard, as if the buried empire was not yet ready to be found. Then a shovel struck something hard, and the ground gave up its secret. Beneath their trembling hands, an entire civilization slowly came back into the light. He stood at the threshold, knowing that what lay ahead would change everything we thought we knew. Every step forward was a step 3,000 years back in time. The ceremonial hall waited in perfect silence, exactly as it had been left on the last day of the empire. Someone had placed those offerings carefully, lovingly, not knowing it would be for the very last time. But deep inside, a sealed door carried warnings, in a language they were only beginning to understand. That night, they argued until dawn about whether some doors are meant to stay closed forever. As the sun rose, he made a decision that he knew he would carry for the rest of his life. The stone groaned. Dust poured out like a final warning, and the darkness beyond breathed for the first time in 3,000 years. Inside, every wall was covered in writing, as if the Empire had poured its entire soul into one final room. His hands trembled, knowing that whatever lay inside had been placed there by the last hands of a dying empire. Layer by layer, the wrapping fell away, revealing a vessel sealed with the desperate care of someone who knew the end was coming. The seal cracked, and for just a moment, the ancient air inside met the modern world. Inside, wrapped in copper, was a scroll written in a steady, careful hand, as if the writer knew every word mattered. Word by word, the linguist translated, and what he read made him set down his pencil and weep. The scroll was written by the last high priest, sealing himself inside, so that the knowledge of his people would not die with them. He had drawn them all, every face, every street, every garden, so that no one would ever be truly forgotten. The last line simply read, "We were here, we were real, and we loved this world deeply." Nobody spoke. They simply sat inside the last room of a forgotten empire, and felt the full weight of what had been lost. Out there in the dark desert, a small light burned. Inside the last room of a civilization the world had forgotten. As the sun rose, it touched those ancient stones again, for the first time in 3,000 years. And slowly, street by street, building by building, the forgotten empire began to rise again. Within months, the discovery filled lecture halls, as the world scrambled to understand what had been found. By morning, their story was on every front page, in every language, in every corner of the world. For the first time in 3,000 years, their art, their words, their faces had a home again. Strangers stood before those ancient faces and recognized something deeply, uncomfortably familiar. Same sky, same river, same mountains. Only the people had changed, and even they were not so different after all. They had looked up at those same stars, asked the same questions, felt the same smallness, and the same wonder. These were not myths, not legends. They were people, with names, with families, with fears, just like us. In their final moments, they did not run. They stood together and watched their world end with dignity. In the end, the last act of the empire was a mother holding her child and whispering that everything would be all right. And then slowly, they were gone, swallowed by history, leaving only stones and stars and silence. But they were never truly gone, because they did what all great civilizations do. They left their story behind. And somewhere, in every generation, someone stops, looks back, and refuses to let the forgotten stay forgotten. One scroll, written by one man, in the darkness of a dying world, had survived everything. The forgotten empire had been found, and the world would never be quite the same again. They were here. They were real. They were magnificent. And now, finally, we remember.